Welcome to Talking New York Real Estate with Vince Rocco. Our show is all about the exciting world of real estate and in particular, how it relates to the luxury New York marketplace. But if you are not planning a real estate transaction in New York, we still have plenty of information you can use no matter where you are. Now, here's our show. Hello everyone, I'm Vince Rocco in New York, so let's get right to what everyone is talking about. Today on the show, bidding successfully on a New York City apartment requires preparation, speed, and strategy. Start by getting fully prepared or approved for a mortgage or having your proof of funds ready if you're buying with cash. Sellers want to know you're serious and qualified. Work with a knowledgeable local agent who can guide you on pricing by analyzing comparable sales and market trends. Once you've found the right apartment, make a clean, strong offer that includes financial statements, pre-approvals, and if possible, limited contingencies. In competitive situations, flexibility on closing dates and responsiveness can set you apart. For co-ops, ensure your financials align with the board's requirements and be ready to submit a strong board package. The New York City marketplace moves very quickly, so be decisive, strategic, and ready to act when the right property appears. And at the table with me today are Danae Montesi from William Raveis Real Estate here in New York and Samantha Beringer from Compass here in New York, and they join me now to discuss. But first, let me welcome my listeners and my viewers from across the United States and all around the globe. This is Talking New York Real Estate, so let's go behind the headlines and inside real estate, the state of our industry.
Hi, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you know the right partner makes all the difference. At Roadway, we deliver an experience your clients will love. For specialized services and white glove care, choose Roadway. Want to learn more? Email me at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
Okay, we're back, everybody. So we're going to talk today. First of all, I've got two powerhouse agents and brokers here, win awards over and over and over again. I love looking at their social media because they're always winning some kind of award, some kind of distinction. They're out there, they're successful, they're smart. And, to talk about this topic today, pricing, we need to have people who kind of understand the psychology of both seller and buyer, because seller has to agree to the price originally, and then the buyer, of course, has to agree to buy. So I really want to kind of dive into how we price apartments, why it's important. We talked off air a little while ago about if something isn't priced properly, it is just not going to sell. But let's go way back to when we first meet buyers. So Danae, I'll start with you.
Yeah.
When we're looking at buyers who come to us either by referral or however, we ask for pre-approval, right? So what is the process that a buyer, first time in the market, second or third time in the market, what is the pre-approval process for a buyer when they come to you and say, hey, I want to buy an apartment, I'm ready, let's do it?
Okay. So I'm humbled every day by my job because usually I ask for the financial form first with the pre-approval.
Yay.
And my financial form has 3 pages to it. It's the first, the assets, the liabilities with the income. Second is just what the bank accounts are in and how they're allocated. And the third, which I find to be extremely important, is the whole breakdown of the debt to income ratio and the post-liquid assets, net then gross. Because when I submit the offer, it aggregates all those numbers, comes up with the debt to income, comes up with the post-liquid assets exactly for that property. And then when brokers get it, usually I get no questions. Something new I've been doing is asking for a screenshot of their credit. I find myself to be a forensic accountant at this job.
We need to be.
When I'm representing buyers, sometimes I find something, I go down this laborious road, especially as a listing agent, and I find something down the line and say, wait a minute, I don't want you to get rejected, so let's stop here, especially as a listing agent. I will ask them, are these W-2? Are these 1099? Because they can hand me a P&L statement. They're making $1 million, but they write off $900,000. So we want to make sure that they get board approved. With that said, something recently that came upon my desk with a buyer is they gave me a loan from a bank that's just non-traditional. We don't really use in New York. And that's something that I didn't look at immediately because their REBNY form looked beautiful. But as we were submitting an offer yesterday, I said, uh-oh, and it had an arm for a co-op, which isn't always permitted. So we did have to go back and use a bank that was more of a traditional warrantable bank for New York City. And those are really the steps I go through on top of a few other things when I'm vetting a buyer.
I mean, so perfectly well said. I couldn't agree with you more. This is why, in the very beginning, when we're talking to buyers for the first time that you're working with them, they may have bought before, the preparation stage is all of it because you don't want to waste people's time. You don't want to waste your own time. How many times, in the beginning when I was just learning, I'd say, yeah, I got a buyer, I got a buyer, I got a buyer. Let's go out and look at 50 apartments, right?
Yes.
And then you go and put an offer in, and they're not qualified, or they don't have enough asset to pass a board, et cetera, et cetera. So when you do this all up front, you can kind of steer them and direct them into the type of purchase they can make and make successfully. Samantha, I'm sure you agree also, but what are your thoughts on getting people pre-approved up front? How much of a requirement is it in your business? And
it's a huge requirement.
Do you get pushback at all from, especially the financial statement, do you get pushback at all from buyer?
I do. I think that they're a little confused sometimes as to why you're asking for all of this information. But if you're taking on a buyer and you're representing them, this is the best way to represent them, to make sure that you can advise them properly going forward. To your point, if you take someone out and you haven't done all of that and you've taken them out to see 50 apartments, then you go to submit an offer and you're like, oh, yeah, you're unqualified. There's also sometimes, and I've seen it a little bit more lately as people try and go with non-traditional lenders, to your point, where they said, oh, I've got my pre-approval, and they send it to me and it's a pre-qualification. And what is it, 2008? We don't accept those. And that tends to be a bit of a conversation sometimes. They don't understand the difference and the nuance between pre-approval and pre-qualification. A pre-qual is a non-starter, obviously, we know that. But they don't always understand that. So it really starts different conversations to go through the financial things, and then it helps give them a little bit more comfort, I think, when you start to get them to understand that, look, I'm here to help you. I'm here to make sure that you get through the process. Instead, we submit things that aren't going to be accepted by either the seller, let alone a co-op board. And obviously, these things change between condos and co-ops. I think co-ops is, you have to be way more diligent and make sure that everything is to the letter. Condos, depending upon the price point, obviously you can be a little bit more lax. Not lax, but it doesn't have to be, your DNA and everything else in between.
Right. But when it comes to the financial statement, and I like to emphasize this too, all the time, it's a good snapshot of what your buyer has. Mm-hmm. Assets, liabilities, cash on hand. And the reason we talk about all that stuff or ask for that financial document to be filled out is because a co-op board, even a condo board, is going to look through that. So, typically, a buyer will say, well, I have enough money for the down payment and I know I can get a mortgage.
Sure.
Okay. However, if you're looking at a co-op board, what about other assets? What about cash in bank?
Mm-hmm.
What about 401k numbers? How, do you make buyers understand, Danae, that this is really important information that we need to know so we can present you properly? I tell buyers all the time, it's more than just finding that right apartment. You got to get approved.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And something else that comes up, two things I was just thinking about as you were making great points, is when I say we need to know your debt, it's very important. I have no debt.
Correct.
Well, the maintenance and the mortgage you're about to have, that's the debt.
Mm-hmm.
And even though sometimes I get someone on Wall Street who's making a lot of money, but they have a small base and then a big bonus, that has to be like 5 years of consecutive bonus. Mm-hmm. Their debt to income may be wildly high. That's where I would say, well, then let's look at a condo. What is the purpose of this? Are you going to rent it out? Mm-hmm. And then they say, I want a lax co-op. Well, what does that mean? Usually the most lax co-ops, unless they're a small brownstone, are the most unstable cooperatives. They're permitting this for a reason. Mm-hmm. So the other point is, who are you buying this for? Because not everybody's forthcoming with that. Is this for your child? Is this for you? Is it parent buying for child? Is there a guarantor? So we really have to ask so many personal questions. As I'd say, let me ask you what you wouldn't ask on our first date, but we have to go through the gamut to make sure that we don't go on this road with the buyer for them to get rejected in a co-op. In a condo, of course, it's very different. In a condo, especially when I'm dealing with someone who has a lot of assets, a lot of liquid money, like not including 401k, I say just, if you don't want to submit every single statement that you have, that's fine. But we need to show that you can afford the apartment and then some. So that's the protocol, I would say, for a condo versus a co-op buyer.
How many times have I had to tell buyers, and by the way, when we're in the process of getting board approval, don't go out and use your credit card and don't go out and buy things. I had somebody years ago bought a brand new car while we're waiting for board approval or board submission. And I'm like,
That's going to show up.
there goes your credit report, dude. Are you kidding me? You buy a brand new car. You couldn't wait till you got approved to have that done?
No,
Right.
just a couple of weeks. It's fine.
Just right. Okay. But these are the things that we have to, in the prep stage, prepare our clients. So let's now go to the seller side. Okay, so we get our buyer prepped and ready to go, find the right apartment, find the right place, whatever. Let's talk about the seller. So when we go to a listing agreement, a listing pitch, and we want to get that agreement signed, we have to talk to the seller in what I call, normal, tones, and don't get excited, and get really into it price-wise, because
Yeah.
everybody wants millions of dollars more for their apartment because I just renovated, or I just painted, or I this and I
Right.
that. Well, you don't have gold bars in between your walls, okay? This is what I tell them all the time. What is the first point of conversation, Samantha, you have when you're talking to a seller? You go there with comps, you want to get a price that's going to sell. We get resistance most of the time, not all the time.
Most of the time, you have to remember sellers, it's an emotional thing for them. They're attached, whether it's attached to their renovation or attached to the furniture that they've put in there meticulously, whatever the case may be. They always have different ideas that are not based on data and comparables or anything of that nature. It's based on emotion. And so for me to go in there, it's making them comfortable in a conversation to begin with. If they're not comfortable and they think that maybe I've pushed too hard right in the beginning, it's a different conversation. So it's really, for me, I like to listen to them first, let them get everything out. Then we talk about the data, and then I used to make this joke. It's like in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I'm a little rough from them in the beginning, and then I rub them with a diaper at the end. Get them all nice and tender. So there's a reason for that.
It's
Is that it's a
process.
lot. It can be a lot for a seller. I've been a seller. I don't like it. I was a big pain in the tush seller, actually, which is not surprising because sellers are sellers and they have to go through their process. So with me, it's letting them talk, getting out, understanding what their needs really are, and then trying to find a way in the conversation to get them to where I think is the best number for them to sell. Some people are not going to be good with the one number. You've maybe got to give them a little bit of a range or an option or two so that they feel like they're not being pushed too hard. Some people are just not ready, and that's okay. That's what we're here for. Our job is to bring them through that process so that they get to a place of comfort where they are ready. And if they're not ready and you put something on at a number that's not right for the market and not right for them, it's gonna have an issue in the process. There's gonna be an energy. And I know that sounds like a little bit of hocus pocus, but it's totally true.
But it's very true.
Articulated great.
So, Danae, we go armed with comps, right?
Yeah.
Comps in the building of apartments that have sold prior, comps in the neighborhood, and we generally kind of look at like a 4 or 5 block radius, like apartments, what they're selling for, what you should, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, be selling for. Oftentimes, and I just had this happen, and you review the comps, and right away the comment back is, well, my neighbor sold 4 years ago, and they got $300,000 more than you're telling me I can get today. Now, these are current comments all the time. How do you handle that? Because we know what happened 3, 4, in some cases 10 years ago is not today.
You have to be okay to walk away if you're going to sit with the listing for longer than 6 months to a year. Usually in New York City, things sell in 6 months, maybe a year. But you have to be okay to say, I'll be the second broker when you're really ready to sell. I was the third broker on a listing in a building I sell in a lot. I gave them the price with a very well-respected broker the first time, and we both gave the same price. We both called each other and said, well, what price did you give? We both were rooting for each other. It was fine. They hired someone else who gave them some egregious number.
Of course.
Second time, they hired a friend from outside the city. Third time, they called me and said, okay, we're ready now. What's the number? They also had multiple board rejections. By that point,
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
the first broker had it for 2 years. The second broker had it for 6 months. We sold it in 4 months, Stephanie and I, my partner.
I love to be the third person.
Yeah, I'll be the third marriage.
I'll be
you want to
that
get it
second or
right the
third.
second or third time? I'm fine.
Three's the
I'll
charm.
take the kids.
Yeah, there you go.
But I think you have to be okay to say, you know what? I get very emotionally invested in every single one of my listings. I don't care if it's a studio. I have a studio right now. I am so invested in that studio. I am dialing for dollars. I'm calling all the brokers in the neighborhood, including asking the both of you before this if you know anybody for some of my listings.
She did that.
I can't do it. It has to be priced right. And one of the questions I ask a seller now when I walk in, if I think that we're going, to your point, I feel it out in the beginning down a road of my listing should be priced, $500,000 higher than neighbor sold. What do you think it's worth? Because then I can retrain my brain and try to get to their thinking and say, okay, let's see if we can backtrack and see if we can meet in the middle. And then I can explain my point on where I came in with the price. But if I'm maybe 50 grand higher or lower than them, then it gives me an opportunity to say, you know what, that's a great price, let's do it. Otherwise, sometimes when I give ranges, they'll just choose the higher end, but also it helps me get the listing because they know that I'm a team leader, it's a collaborative effort, and we're going to work on this together.
Oftentimes and I want your opinion on this, oftentimes when I am stuck, with something that's not moving, it's 6 months or more, and you know that it's a pricing problem, oftentimes what I've done in the past is call in a bunch of broker friends, agent friends, and tell my seller, hey, I'm going to just kind of do like a broker price opinion. And I want to ask, the community out there what they think of the price. Because after all, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we're not selling right now. We've been on for way too long. And sometimes I get pushback, sometimes I don't. Samantha, but most of the time I get my way. But so when you go back and you say, all right, so the broker community that I brought in here to check says we need to lower by $30,000 just using a number.
Yeah.
What transpires? I mean, typically,
we
know they're not happy.
They're not happy. And if you're getting to that point, they're definitely, I think, looking for what are the next steps? Like, what's something different that you're doing?
Right.
So bringing that up and doing that is a great extra step that not everybody does.
No.
So you're really going above and beyond. To have that broker community information, it's all about how you present it. And I think gingerly is the way, because it can be a little bit like, hey, by the way, we're wrong.
Correct.
So it's really about how that message is sent, but it's important because the brokerage community is out there. They're boots on the ground. They have the buyers. They know what they're trading at. And to get some additional confirmation, I think is a good word to use, of what you're saying to your seller already, just helps reinforce. I think it needs to be done with kid gloves, depending upon, a lot of these conversations they don't exist inside a vacuum. Certain things will change based on the person who you're speaking to, the property itself, and if it's a co-op or a condo, right? So, but I think that presenting it in a nice sort of ginger fashion that reinforces conversations you've already been having with your seller, I think gives them something to think about in a tender way. Because if you're not moving, they're already upset. You don't need to be upsetting them any further.
No, completely agree. All right, we've got to take a break. We're coming right back with Samantha and with Danae to talk about pricing, how we do it correctly. Talking New York Real Estate is just getting underway on this very, very busy day, so don't go anywhere.
The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
Another thing I do, I agree with what you said, Samantha. The other thing we do, or I have done, is to take some of my sellers on tours of other properties that are listed in their price range, or maybe a little less, maybe sometimes a little higher. And why I do that is because I show them what the comparable apartments out there are listed for, especially when it's lower. And oftentimes the seller says to me, well, they're asking less than I'm asking. And I'm like, correct. And this apartment may be bigger, or this apartment may be nicer, or whatever the comparison is. And most of the time, I've done it a few times, most of the time they get it. Of course, up front they say, I don't want to do that. Why do I don't have time to do that. I have to go to work. I'm busy. And my response is, everybody in New York is very busy, but very busy doing what? Right? Running in circles?
Well, it's very smart because you can make that argument.
I'm
on
so
paper.
busy. Okay, me too.
It's smart to get them to do that because you can make that argument on paper, but it's really easy to, wash it away. Like, oh well. But when you're walking through the space, that's pretty spectacular if you're getting sellers to do that on a regular basis when you hit that wall.
When you hit that wall, exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. So let me let's follow up with, so we need to price right, and we talked about this before. We need to price right because our buyers are sensitive to what pricing is. Now, when I first came in the business 23 years ago, we didn't have the systems. Hey, you're laughing.
There's no systems.
I met Samantha at the start of my career. I love her to death. Anyway, we'll get to that later. But look, they did not have the systems that we have today. Street Easy,
Right.
Trulia, blah, blah, on and on and on. So they had to trust what an agent said, right? They had to call us for the appointment. They had to trust that we knew what the pricing was. Today, buyers are on these systems looking for themselves before they call you, or they'll send you links. Every time I get up in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, I look at my email, I got 4 links being sent to me by 4 different buyers. I want to see this, Vince. I want to see whatever. They're sensitive to what pricing is. So when you want to take them someplace and they look it up and they say, but that's overpriced. In the very beginning, I say, well, how do you know that? This is not your business, right?
Right.
Do you get that?
Yes.
Or I don't want to
So-
see it because I think the seller is not flexible and
Yeah.
it's overpriced.
It's actually, if something is overpriced, this is how I bought my home. If something is overpriced, it's a great opportunity to be the first person to bid on it before they adjust the price, and many other people do. When I was looking in the market, I said to my husband, let's look at all the overpriced listings because we're not going
Agents
to win
can
a
be
bid.
very difficult buyers, by the way. Not suggesting that you are, but the agents can be very difficult buyers.
It's so true.
I wouldn't want an agent for a
done it.
client.
I've done it. Exactly. I've done it, so I relate. Go ahead.
We looked at all the overpriced listings, and then I found one that we loved, and I said, let's bid on it. And it was way overpriced. And then I did something I tell my buyers never to do. After I bid, they countered, and then I disappeared for a month. And then in that month, when we were ready to come back, somebody had bid on the property. So now I was bidding against somebody else.
Yeah.
So now they got more money out of me, higher than I originally offered because I waited.
Yeah.
So it's actually a good opportunity. I had a buyer yesterday send me a property, and to your point, she said, wow, this is wildly overpriced. I said, good. Let's go see it and compare it to the rest that we're viewing. And if it makes sense, you have the money, maybe we can put in a fair market value offer. I think it's a great opportunity to show the buyer what's out there, what they can afford, and see what a seller is really worth selling it for.
Sam, how do buyers know if a listing really is priced to encourage a bidding more, or to offer full price? Or, what are the steps that a buyer is going through in their mind? And all buyers are different, and we've all been buyers and sellers. So what do they go through to make themselves comfortable, I guess is the best word to use, in knowing that, all right, the price is the price. I think it may be right on or a little lower, but maybe I need to go a little over
Right.
in a bidding situation.
Oh, to go over.
To go over.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's tough. It's
wh-
tough to
how do
get
they
people
there?
to go over. I think it goes to how much do you really want that apartment?
Yeah.
What are you willing to pay for it? And how many other people are interested in the apartment? So, for example, I just did one. I had 11 bids on an apartment. It went, probably like 3 and change over the ask. But if it's priced, so here's the thing. If it's priced to encourage bidding wars, you can tell. If it's priced a little bit under the most recent comps, they're obviously trying to go over the most recent comp. So if you're $50,000, $100,000 under the recent comp, they're encouraging. They're trying to get people to go over. And it actually tends to work. I mean, it's a strategy that when the
it
market is
absolutely
even a little
works.
soft, works very, very well.
100%.
Mine was the same. We priced it $100,000 under the most recent comp. We're $250,000 over the ask. So it really...
Okay. What did I tell you about powerhouses here? Okay, really?
So strategy is everything. And I'm going to tell you that my sellers were like, but why would we do that? It's not where the comp is. I said, just trust me. It's about getting the more people in. And when in certain price points, it's not every price point, right? Everything, like I said before, doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's specifics for each. But in this particular instance, it was about getting the most amount of people in. And when you have more people in, obviously you have more interest, you have the potential for more offers. And so then it goes into ridiculous worlds because I can tell you that this place is not worth the price that it's gone to.
And a lot of times it's not. And that's why I think we have issues when years later, a seller comes to you and says, well, but I paid $200,000 or $250,000 more than you're telling me I can sell for today. That is a hard nut to crack.
Yep. You have to wait
on any level. And I've said to sellers many times, well, then in the building that I work in all the time, especially, then you can't sell right now because this is not a marketplace where it's going to return what you want. Now, oftentimes, if you sold something to somebody 10 years, 15 years ago, and they paid, you and I talked about a project offline before, is it worth those numbers today? Probably not. But they've also spent 15 or 20 years paying down a mortgage.
Exactly.
So they're not going to lose, really. But we all know what the thought is. Well, I paid $1 million, and I have to make more than $1 million on a sale. What do we do with that? Let me ask you, Janae, about buyer and seller markets, which we kind of flip-flop between. I'm not really quite sure what market we're in today.
Yeah.
But explain to us what a buyer's market is.
A buyer's market is when a buyer has the opportunity to really be able to bid on properties and succeed. In a seller's market, we're talking about properties that are priced at market value going over asking price. Right now, this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing the $2 million and up market doing well. I'm seeing studio and one bedrooms take longer to sell. In January, I found it to be wildly busy for sellers. I said, wow, this is the first January I've had since I've been in this for 11 years, that it's a new year and people are out there in the freezing cold buying. Right now, I'm seeing one bedroom and studios sit on the market. Why is that? I really don't know. We can say because maybe that person's out preparing their summer in the Hamptons or doing whatever they're doing to have fun with their friends. Or maybe they're simply not looking to buy right now because the market was so volatile. But I'm seeing the $2 million and up market for sellers be more advantageous than one and two bed.
Do you think on the studio and one bedroom market, I happen to agree with what Danae just said, but do you think it's because they, when they bought high? And as I've said to sellers through the years, I've also said it to buyers through the years, there's a ceiling that you're just never going to break through. Whether it's a glass ceiling or not, you're never going to break through that ceiling. You can only put a number on a studio or a one bedroom,
Yes.
so much.
Agreed.
When you get to that ceiling, is that what the problem is? I mean,
Well,
I think it is.
Springboarding off what she said, I think that interest rates come into play here a little bit. The $2 million up is a buyer that isn't going to be
elephant in the room.
Yeah, but it is and it isn't an elephant in the room because 6.5% is back to normal as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
That's where it should be.
We all know that.
If you've been around long enough, you know that 6.5 to 7 was the going rate. When you start going over 7 and 8, that's a cranky problem. But 6.5, 6 to is really a normal world to me.
100%.
So, but I do think that for a studio and one bedroom buyer, especially if they're their own first time home buyer without any help from a parent or family member or spouse or anything of that matter, I think that that's where they are affected, and they're probably more inclined to stay put and see what happens. I think those people are waiting and seeing because they can't take on that. But the $2 million up buyer probably can absorb it a little bit more. Maybe they put more down where they get a better interest rate. Someone I know just got just under 6 just recently based on the amount of money that you're putting down. So if you're going to lower that loan to value,
the same thing. Yeah.
you can do it. So that makes sense to me as to why you see more activity there and a little less on the lower end.
Yeah, to the point of sellers rather sitting back and waiting, I think in all of our businesses, I mean, I have sellers who actually need to sell.
Yep.
They're in one bedrooms. They got married since they bought. They're now wanting to have children. You can't really raise children in a one bedroom or a two bedroom, needs a three bedroom, whatever. And I'm more of a listing agent, I say this every week, than a buyer's agent. And what I'm seeing in my business is sellers saying to me, Vince, I have to sell, or I really need to upgrade. And in some cases, downgrade, from a 2 or 3 bedroom to a 1 bedroom, whatever. But they look at the amount of interest that they took out at first, 4%, 4.5%, 3 point something percent. And they look at, even though you and I agree that 6.5 is normal, they're doubling. And so their monthlies, what I'm finding in the whole pricing conversation with sellers these days, is the fact that buyers are out there looking at monthlies more than the actual purchase
What
price.
can I afford on a monthly basis?
Correct. I have my fixed income. I know I know what I earn. I know what I can spend. When maintenance is doubling every year or going up, double digits, I meant to say every year when it used to be 3, 4, 5% maybe.
It's crazy.
Now it's 10, 11, and 12%. Real estate taxes here are high, and now you want to double the interest rate? A buyer says, I got the down payment, Vince, and the purchase price, is really not so bad, but these monthlies are going to kill me. How often do we hear that?
Well, what I say to a buyer is don't pay attention as much to the price in these buildings because you're also buying the building. You're not just buying the apartment.
Correct.
Look at what the common charges and taxes are. Look at what the maintenance is. Are there assessments? How long has that assessment been going on for? I sold in a building where the assessment was going on for 4 years. It doesn't matter what management says.
Insane.
They could put out a letter saying it's scheduled to end tomorrow. But how many times did you send that letter? For how many years?
I have a situation like that. They tell everybody it's going to end in December. I already know they're working on a new one.
Exactly. They have a
I have
special
one till
assessment.
2027.
Yeah, a
And
regular
it's
assessment.
obnoxious.
And assessments are fine if the maintenance makes sense with the assessment. But when the maintenance is high and then they have an assessment and then maybe a special assessment, then I would say, okay, let's look at a building where maybe the price is a little higher. Why is the price higher? Because maybe the maintenance is lower. They have commercial space that's bringing that maintenance down. What is the commercial space? I know an Upper East Side co-op that has a Starbucks, recession-proof. It had a CVS.
Yeah.
It was great. I saw people during the pandemic still wait outside for that coffee in that building. And that building does so well. They have a healthy reserve fund. Their maintenance is historically low and the prices are a little higher. But that shouldn't scare a buyer. And that's what I tell them.
Listen, in the building I live in for 21 years on the Upper West Side, okay? 21 years, I love my building. As you say, I love my apartment. However, Local Law 11, 1 year ago, scaffolding went up. 1 year ago this month, scaffolding went up.
Still there?
Still there.
Have they started the work yet?
No.
No. I can understand.
Are you on the board?
No.
Well, it has a lot
And
to
if
do
my
with the
managing
city,
agent
too.
is listening to me, too bad. What's? Don't you hire somebody right away?
Yeah,
you're,
well,
you're paying for
it's
the
the
scaffolding
city.
You're
every
paying
month.
for the scaffolding.
You
rent
pay for
that
the
stuff.
scaffolding, and then the city deems when it's going to start, and you have to have the scaffolding there, and you're paying the company, and the city dictates all of that.
1 year.
Yeah,
1 year.
That's
it's
a
like
special
over $1
situation.
million
That's
project.
Out of the out of the
The
norm.
last time we had scaffolding up for 4 years. So.
So this is how you guys roll.
This is how.
Yeah.
We roll.
Yeah.
This is how you're.
This is how we roll.
management.
Again, managing agent. Okay, here we are. This is how we roll.
You're not doing it right. Sorry.
It was up, but they were working, and
Yeah.
then something went wrong, and they had to go back and do it again. But at least they were working.
Yeah.
Every day I walk out of the building and say to the doorman, "Anybody come to work today?" And he used to be like, "Stop asking me that question.
I know.
You're a troublemaker. Stop asking that question."
Well, a lot of buyers will ask when we're in apartments, the listing agent, has Local Law 11 happened?
Yeah.
The listing agent's like, oh, yeah, they answer the best they can. But unless you live in the building, you really don't have an answer.
It has to happen regardless. It's happening.
Yeah.
It's happening in every building.
It's
Just
a
know
law.
it's happening.
It
It's a
has
law.
to
It has to
Yeah.
happen every couple of years. So it is
But
what
I
it is.
just for the record, I hate scaffolding.
No, I agree.
I hate it.
Yeah.
I do like
It's
that sexy
ugly
scaffolding
and-
though, the white ones that look like arches. I'll take that.
Yeah,
Those
I
are
haven't seen a
attractive.
lot of those, but you're right, they actually are.
Those
All right,
ones are attractive.
let's talk about, from a buyer perspective to a seller, what makes an offer clean in the eyes of a seller? Now, we talked about this a little while ago, right? What makes an offer clean?
No contingencies. That's a clean offer.
Explain contingencies
So a contingency is,
for our viewers.
yeah, no contingencies means nothing to sell. You don't have a loan. You're flex on closing. That is no contingencies, period.
100%.
Nothing.
Nothing.
No
you
inspection.
have to arrive with your offer clean. That's exactly what it means. I'm ready to go. I can get my financing. My financial statement looks good. We're here to go. I'm not paying off. Oftentimes I'm working with people who are selling and buying at the same time. And if you're putting offers in co-op world, it's like, whoa, you can't do that.
I know.
But what seller and or buyer do you know that wants to wait until they actually close before they start looking or before they put
Nobody.
offers in?
Nobody, but they have to.
'Cause they
have to at least
yeah.
have a signed contract. Otherwise,
A signed-
at
a
minimum.
signed contract at a minimum. Right. But still, you can't move forward, right?
I just
Otherwise,
had
you have to
this.
go on a rental and breaking a
Oh,
lease in
there's a
New
word.
York.
Go on a
yeah,
rental.
go on a rental.
Yeah.
And short-term housing, you can go to like Blue Underground, furnished habitats, or furnished quarters. But breaking a lease in New York, I mean, I'm not an attorney, but it's not as hard as you think because a lot of the leasing, like a Glenwood, they'll say, well, maybe we'll get a higher price for the rent, or you can lease a sign. I would rather have my customer go into a rental than put that pressure on me or themselves to rush and get into an investment that they're not 100% about, or they're on the cusp and don't qualify for, and then they get board rejected.
That's what half the fun is.
Yeah,
That's what happens.
it's a fun road.
But you could relate to
I'm
this,
doing it
Sam.
right now.
You could relate to this because I've done this for years, as you have, in new development, when you're selling new development, and the initial closings are delayed for a whole
Forever.
host of reasons, right? Forever most of the time. And you get people who are selling and moving into a new development, or renting that are moving into a new development. And the amount of times I've got yelled and screamed at because of closings being delayed. But Vince, you don't understand. I can't renew my lease because they won't give me a month to month. They'll only give me a 1 year. And then if I break it in a couple of months, they're going to charge me a penalty, blah, blah, blah. And I look at these people like,
I don't have
don't
to
kill
tell
the
you.
messenger.
Yeah, there's nothing that we can do.
What,
really.
can I do
No.
about that, right? Or if they're selling something and it's taking a little longer, but yet they want to close on something new,
Right.
it's always the same. Well, I have to move, and I have to move. Well, yeah. I get it.
It becomes
doesn't work
our
that way.
problem.
It becomes our problem. Well, don't we own every problem anyway?
Exactly.
You know, it's like, it's cuckoo. But so when you're putting a package in, and I started doing this years ago, I guess before it even became fashionable, does it make sense, especially for a co-op, does it make sense for us to ask our buyers to write a personal letter to the
A love
board?
letter.
Of course,
love letter.
yes.
You know,
Tell us why. Tell us why.
well, it gives a little person.
I mean, I love it. I agree.
I do too, and I think there's certain markets where you're not allowed to do it,
Correct.
which is crazy. But I get why. I get why, and I get why people would want to do them. It gives a little bit of a personal touch. You're looking at paper, right? If you're looking at paper, there's
So well
really
said.
no way to understand who this person is that you're going to make your neighbor, your shareholder, if it's a co-op. They're part of your world. It just gives a little bit of sense of who these people could be. Obviously, they're going to make it sound as delicious as possible, but it still gives you a
And
little
the board
sense.
is still going to meet them and interview them and talk to them.
100%.
But I agree with that initial calling card, as I call it. And I never get pushback from any buyer that I ask to do that.
No, we'll take it.
Yeah, because again, you're right. It's all about the paper. It's all about the numbers. It's all about the financials.
Yeah.
It's, like,
It's very black and
well,
white.
don't you want to know about me?
It adds a little color.
It adds
in
a lot of
black
color.
and white process.
Have you had pushback in asking people to do that or no?
No, it's if you're submitting for a co-op, it's a requirement. Usually, we have something called board packager domicile for the viewers. I know you use it all the time.
I'm doing it today after the show.
Yeah, and it's actually
Domicile.
great because it streamlines everything,
Oh,
lets
yeah.
the buyer
Oh.
upload directly versus
amazing.
back in the day when we had to do a lot of paper. And in most of these board applications, you'll see it says cover letter, and that section is meant for you to upload your letter to the board. And I think it's really important. I learned from board members that they don't usually read all the reference letters,
I'm sure they don't.
but they do read the cover letter.
They don't
They
read
want
that
to know
stuff at
who's
all.
coming in the building.
That's such a great point. Yes, they do.
And if you have a dog, it's a good spot to put just a few little pictures
Everybody loves
because
the dog.
everybody
Those little
Everybody
boo-boos.
loves the
Those
dog.
loves
little
the dog.
boo-boos.
They
Those
want to
little
know
boo-boos.
how big they are
course.
and
Of course.
that they're good dogs. And you put in there, I'm going to be a respectful neighbor. And maybe you put a school that touches the heart of a board member,
Sure.
or an activity, an interest, whatever it is.
But it's so true, and it's an introduction. And speaking of dogs, the other day was Father's Day, and I'm not a dad, but I got so many text messages and emails from friends saying, "Happy Father's Day, Jet's looking down on you," and I'm like, I was
I
trying to have
know.
morning coffee, and I'm reading these text messages, and I'm like, oh my God, that's my little boo.
I know.
And she's gone 6 years already, 5.5 years. But it's like, oh, how sweet. You just
Yeah.
never forget them, right? And
I'm
she still
sure
makes me cry.
People
Jet.
connect with dogs
Yeah.
in a big way. And
Oh, are you
just
kidding?
a little example. I got a little tattoo, and I get like they're like,
I have her right over here.
But then when they're like, what does that say? I'm like, oh, it's my dog. They're like, oh, we love it now.
Yeah.
We love your tattoo. It's totally acceptable. You're not, we don't judge you at all now because it's your dog.
I get that all the
Yeah.
time. Like the big
Yeah.
star over here with her name in it.
Yeah.
All they see is the star. They're like, why do you have a star on your arm? I'm like,
Exactly.
Look at what's in it.
I have a lotus flower, and then next to it, below it, is her name. And so
Unbelievable.
Stella. So they're like, well, who's Stella? My dog. Oh, your tattoo is now acceptable. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, on that note, we're coming right back. Don't go anywhere. This is Talking New York Real Estate and the More Network. We'll be right back.
This podcast is supported by the More Network, powered by Brown Harris Stevens. Real estate touches every aspect of our lives, from design and architecture to investing and the economy. Now there's a way to get all your real estate information in one place. The More Network. With more than 20 podcast and webcast series, the Mastery of Real Estate Network is powered by Brown Harris Stevens, one of the country's most distinguished brokerages. Discover advice from notable entrepreneurs, compelling topics, and access to top global real estate experts. Subscribe to their YouTube and Apple podcast channels by visiting getmorenetwork.com.
Okay, everybody, we are back. So we're talking about buyers, we're talking about sellers, we're talking about pricing an apartment correctly so buyers don't feel intimidated. Buyers can feel they can put in clean offers and move forward and buy the home of their dreams. One of the other things I like to mention to buyers when you get a little pushback or kickback on whatever it is they're considering to buy, I tell them all the time, and I don't mean this in any bad way, but I say, you're not buying your forever home.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
This is New York City. This is not your forever home.
You're moving.
You're going to be moving at some point.
100%.
Especially when it's a one-bedroom or a studio or even a two-bedroom. Your family grows, you need
You're
more
moving.
space. And they kind of look back at me and say, well, but I'm like, no, you're not buying your forever home. Be smart about your purchase. Buy what's good for you and what makes you comfortable. But just keep in mind, this is not your forever home.
No, it's 4 to
Right.
7 years is the average time that people own
Correct.
before they
Until-
trade up, trade down, or do whatever they're doing.
Absolutely. And that's how our markets here work. So buyers always say to me, whether I'm the listing agent and I see buyers come in with their agents or direct, or if I'm working with a buyer. So Vince, what is the seller's motivation? Why is the seller selling?
Yeah.
Where are they going?
Where are they going?
I'm like, none of your business.
And how long?
I'm sorry.
and how long have they lived here? And I'm thinking,
None of your business.
why does that make a difference with
It doesn't.
you buying this
They
apartment?
ask it constantly,
Why?
however.
Why?
I don't know, because I as a listing broker, when they ask it, it actually makes me like
Yeah.
twinge a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
why are you asking me that question? First of all, as a fiduciary, I can't answer that question to begin with. It's private information for the seller. And second of all, I agree. I'm not sure why it's relevant to whether or
don't know
not
at all.
you like the home. Do you like the home? Does it matter
Yeah.
what the seller is doing? It could be personal reasons. It could be moving for work. There are so many different reasons why someone could be moving. They may decide that they only want to face east for the rest of their life. Who knows?
I feel
knows
like
what it
I'm
is?
sometimes guilty of walking through with a buyer and looking at these adorable family photos and looking at their life and pictures and how beautifully done their
Yes.
home is. And it'll
Yes.
slip out. Why are they moving? Even
looks so
coming from
perfect.
me, I'm like, life is great. Like, why would they want to leave the spectacular apartment?
Do you think it has anything to do with the price of the apartment and the buyer wanting to understand the motivation behind the sale so they can maybe feel like they can negotiate a little better?
Yes.
Yeah, I do. I think when it comes from me,
That's what I always
yeah,
thought about, too. I
I
mean, I could be
genuinely
wrong.
have interest in their life, as I do when I'm pitching a listing. I'm looking at all the pictures,
Same
and
here.
I find myself for an hour discussing why great grandpa Ed, was raised in the South Bronx but
Yes.
moved to Midtown. So I think for the buyer, they're thinking, why is it priced so low? Or what is their motivation and how quickly do they want to sell? Why are they leaving? Was there something wrong with the building? Last year, a buyer and I walked into this fabulous apartment. They were not the easiest buyers. Everything had something wrong, and they saw what looked like water damage. And they look, and it wasn't.
It's a biggie.
And they look at the listing agent and said, they left because there were leaks, right? And they said, no, they're leaving because their kids have all grown up. What made you think that? And he pointed to the leak, or the alleged leak. So I think sometimes they always
Yeah.
think it's something nefarious
Yeah,
going on,
yeah.
and they
Oh,
want to know the
absolutely.
answer.
But even if at the end of the day, why someone is moving and their personal circumstances, or even the building, really has absolutely nothing to do with market valuation.
No.
No.
Has nothing to do with what a property is worth.
No.
And what the comps are. So that's why I'm always like, irrelevant.
Exactly. Let's talk a minute about whether it's a hot market, whether it's not a hot market, and there are a few bids on the table. I know I get this question all the time as a seller's agent, and I understand where it's coming from the buyer agent. So, Vince, can you tell us like how many offers are on the table or what the offer numbers are?
Oh.
Now, again, using your term, our fiduciary responsibility to the seller.
You can't do that.
No, you can't. And I get turned off a little bit when agents ask me that question.
So the number. Yeah.
They want to know the number, and I'm like, well, are you kidding me? Really?
I can give you some guidance, but I can't give you exact numbers. It's
Well, is it over
inappropriate.
the asking price? Is it under the? Or is it right? I said, I can't tell you.
Right.
But you should know that. Right?
Well, I just did this where I literally received 10 bids over the weekend on something, and everyone was asking me the same question, direct and brokers alike.
Yeah.
And I referenced a comp that had closed within 2 weeks. I said, that's your comp. Use that
Yeah,
one.
that's smart.
That's your
That's
comp.
very
I'm
smart,
not going to
actually.
give you.
That's very
I'm not going
smart
to tell
to
you anything.
do.
It closed 2 weeks ago. This is the
That's-
one.
that's pretty
This
smart.
is what you need to be looking at. Look at that. And it was over where we were priced as well, and that's why I went. But our number went even over that number, so it worked perfect. I guided
of
directs to that as well.
But don't you try and guide these agents into thinking
Yeah.
or doing, put an offer in.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Absolutely.
matter what that offer is because if your buyer feels it's overpriced, maybe it does need to come down. Maybe the seller needs to. I'm big at, and I tell this to sellers all the time. You need to hear all offers.
Yes.
I mean, it's my responsibility to give you all, but you need to hear them because when you get lowball offers, you're going to get ticked off at me. But that's what the market is speaking or
Yeah.
what the market is saying.
It's
So
still information that you can use and make better decisions with in the future.
100%.
Right. And if another broker comes along and says, "Did you get any offers?" You can say yes.
Yeah.
You legitimately got one.
Right.
And you also never know where the buyer's going to go with that offer because the seller might counter and then they might come right in the middle. And that middle might be 200 grand away from the original offer. Buyers want to see what they can get an apartment for. And sometimes they'll throw out a number and see what sticks. And their broker might say, they'll call and say, "Hey, Danae, I'm embarrassed, but here's the offer."
Sure.
I'm always excited. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm going to
of
call my
course.
seller
It's a
and tell them.
conversation.
Exactly. It starts a conversation.
You never know how either party is going to respond until those numbers are in hand because they don't know
100%.
how they're going to respond
Yep.
until they have it.
100%.
They can think they do, but until the number is there as a hard number, then they know how they'll really respond.
Keying in on a point you made before, how does it really matter in the buyer's mind how long an apartment is on the market? A lot of times buyers will come in to say, well, it's been on the market 6 months. Is there a problem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does matter, unfortunately, but it is not always, we can't control the narrative out there on the web, and that's really unfortunate. And being days on the market is not necessarily a symptom of that there's something wrong with the apartment or the building. It could be like I have an apartment right now where I can only get in for an hour on Friday and an hour
Yep.
on Sunday.
Yeah,
and
I
I can
know
assure you
yeah.
that 2 hours a week does not an apartment sell.
Yeah.
So there's all types of things that can go on there. And I just think that unfortunately, because you can't control the narrative, yes, the first thing that buyers go to is, oh, it's been on the market for 6 months. There must be something wrong. However, also, the amount of days on the market, the average used to be 147 days. Then for many years, it was like 30 days.
Yep.
Now we're getting back more into what I consider to be a more normal market. 30 days selling for everything is pandemonium.
Oh,
quite frankly. I mean,
definitely.
I love it. Don't get me wrong. But it's
We
pandemonium.
all do.
Yeah.
but
And it's not
crazy.
reality.
Right.
It usually takes a little longer to do these things. And I'd say that the market, probably driven a little bit by interest rates and a lot of other stuff that's going on, is starting to return to a little bit of normalcy where the timing and the pace is a little bit slower, which freaks people out, but really, again, is not a symptom of anything.
How difficult is it, Danae, to talk to a seller when something's been on the market for a long time? And I'm going through this right now with 2 sellers with stuff that's on 6 months or more, and we need another reduction. But it's always a conversation that it's like, whoa, where's the vodka bottle at the end of the day? Because it's like, whoa.
I say to my partner, Stephanie, because we develop these relationships with our sellers, and there's a part of you that just wants them to like you. So I say,
Right. It's a
you know,
likability. It's a
like,
likability
I
thing.
also
yeah.
not wrong.
the people pleasing in me wants you to still like me with this bad news.
Yeah.
But I say to her, don't be scared, be prepared. We have the comps ready. We have the feedback ready. If it's a difficult seller, I usually have a shared Google Drive because I don't want to hear Well, I don't recall any feedback about that. Then everyone gets the feedback at the same time.
If you're not getting feedback, that's a symptom of that you're not positioned
Exactly.
properly.
And
if
then,
you don't get second
yeah.
showings and you don't get follow-up questions, it's your numbers.
Or you get multiple showings.
Yeah.
And then no offers.
And no
that
offer.
happened to us last year.
And that's one of the problems with one of the listings I have now. I'm going after here to show this particular apartment. And oftentimes I'm like, oh, here we go again, because I know where it's going to end. And multiple showing, and no offer. I think we had one offer. They pulled out because she decided, I don't want to live in a studio. I'm like, well, then why are you looking at
Why are you
studios?
looking?
Okay,
Yeah.
whatever.
Not so bright.
But I'm thinking, okay, so no offers. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, no offers. What is that telling you? I know the market's a little cuckoo right now, but what is that telling you?
Well, that's telling me your marketing is fabulous.
Yes, thank you.
So
for the
someone's
showings.
looking at the marketing and saying, I got to come in here. The problem is once they come in, they say, oh, wow, this is priced too high.
Mm-hmm.
But that should be a good indicator for your seller that you have done everything right to put it out there, to make the product look beautiful and to get the reach and frequency. The second problem is when we talk to the seller about the reduction and they say, fine, drop it a few $1,000s. That's what I call death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, no.
We are to drop it significantly to get a new pool of buyers in. Now on Street Easy, the trick that I've learned is you don't want to do the 9-9. You want to keep it even because then you're getting both.
100%.
Yep, you're getting over and you're getting under.
And you're getting under.
Exactly.
But what about the strategy of taking it off the market? This is always another controversial thing. And I actually lost a listing a couple of years ago because they were so ticked off at me that I said, I'm going to take it off for a couple of weeks because it had been on for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to take it off. We're going to lower the price and we're going to come back on brand new listing. They got so furious with me. They took it away from me and gave it to somebody else
I love a revamp.
who sold it at the price, the new price
that
I
you
was going
told
to put
them
it
to
out
do.
at.
well-
They basically took your.
But why would you take it off the market? I don't understand. Why would you do that? You're
'Cause you're
losing.
revamping it.
That's
It's a
it. You're
refresh.
yeah.
Good strategy, bad strategy?
Totally
Well,
great strategy.
someone last year said that they were going to give me one more month to sell it, and then they're going to hire a broker they used. And I said, do not hire someone else who's going to use the same pricing strategy I told you to do from day one. So then she said, okay, that's a good point. We adjusted the price. I sold it in literally 30 days. I think when you take it off, the only scary part about that is once it gets taken off, all these brokers who pay for these services for
Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Seller.
yep,
You just have to,
start calling.
inform your sellers of that stuff. Hey, when we do this, you're going to get 1,000
Oh,
calls
yeah.
by this creepy
Or
service.
even if you're in between, waiting to get a renewal
Yeah.
sign.
Yep.
How many times? my
Oh,
seller
they're
calls,
calling at the end.
They're like, Vince, I got 3 calls today from brokers.
course
who
you did.
See it expired.
that they have buyers. They have buyers.
Oh, they have
You
buyers
Oh,
buyers
I have the
waiting.
right buyer for you,
Yeah, of
and I'm
course
like,
they do.
got it.
Of course they do.
Yep.
We have a few minutes left, and I want to talk a little bit about the pricing difference between co-ops and condos. And we all know within the industry what the differences are. But viewers out there, listeners out there, don't really get it. When, for example, I start with a new buyer and they start sending me listings all the time, I want to see this, I want to see this, I want to see this. 9 times out of 10, the listings they're sending me are co-op listings. Why? Because they're cheaper. So, but we all know that there's a lot more than that listing just being cheaper, why it may not apply to them. What's the real issue here with a buyer thinking that they can buy this co-op because it's cheaper, but they really can't?
Well, they might not completely understand what it means to purchase in a co-op.
Correct.
The limitations, the potential restrictions, the requirements, as we've been through a couple of times here today, to get in. I think they're great. I mean, you can get a great deal on a co-op, right? You can get some beautiful co-ops.
You can.
They're significantly cheaper.
I own 2 or 3
and some
co-ops
have
through the years.
some are run very well. The issue I find with co-ops sometimes is that they often have to do a lot of upgrades to keep up, if you will, and assessments. And so I feel like they all have to do it. It's a growing pain they all must go through. But if they keep their maintenances nice and low, I think it's a great buy for a buyer, to be perfectly honest, as long as they understand the limitations. And I usually find that how they can use the apartment, including renting and pets and all of this stuff, are limitations that they're not expecting. Obviously, in a condo, you can do whatever you want. I tell them you can set it on fire when you're done if you like. Whatever you want to do, it's yours. It's yours to destroy or love in any way that you see fit.
But when we're good points, and I agree with you. But when we're talking to sellers about coming up with the right price,
Right.
I know I do this, but how important is it to keep the board approval process in mind
It's
when
all
we're
in my
pricing?
mind.
Right.
Because also there's buildings that I fortunately and unfortunately work in that want to keep prices at a certain level, whether you call it vested interest, whatever it is, to make sure that when they sell, they're going to sell for a higher price, probably over
100%.
market value, which goes into we need to do a credit at closing. And how much of a credit can you do? With cash, you can do whatever you want, but with a loan, you can't.
Decorator's credit, you can give as much as you like.
Yeah, well, with a loan, there's a cap.
Right.
So and I deal with that, unfortunately and fortunately, probably about 5 to 10 times a year, where we're not selling an asset for the price the board wants us to sell it for. So we have to adjust the price significantly, hope we get cash, and then sell it significantly higher.
And what a lot of agents, more newer in the business than not, don't really realize that, when you have a board turned down in a co-op, a lot of times, oftentimes it's really supposed to be about financials and the buyer. Oftentimes, the board is concerned about the integrity of the price or the comps in the building. For example, if a board member lives in the same line and you're selling it for $150,000 less than they will want when they go to sell it, they're going to say, no, we're not going to do this. And buyers are sitting there thinking, well, why did I get declined?
Yeah.
What is this all about?
You could try to resubmit it and bet that the reason was because of the price. And if you're close with board members, maybe they'll nudge and tell you what happened, not exactly, but they'll give you an idea. Usually what I like to do in the difficult board buildings, I'll submit the comps with the sales application because I don't want to get a rejection based on price with a perfectly qualified buyer.
Yeah. I mean, I've only had that situation once, and we after digging and digging, we realized that it was really about the building comp than anything else because the buyer was beyond qualified. I mean, beyond millions of dollars cash after closing. Sam, you and I share the same background in new development stuff. So when you're bidding on new development, how does it differ necessarily from resale?
Well, I would say even in a softer market like now, developers are going to hold to that purchase price. It's very rare still even. I have 2 contracts out in my little development now. They're both at full ask. We work on the back end. We're not coming off those purchase prices. Right. So
explain that a little bit though for the audience.
In new development, it is the wild west. But instead of the seller paying the sales tax, transfer taxes, it is pushed on the buyer as well as their legal fee, which is a lovely little thing that they've done. But so when the market is
when we first started, the developer paid everything.
Right. So
I'm sorry, the buyer.
paid everything. Right. Yeah. So when the market is soft, it's the first to go. The transfer tax and the legal fee is the first thing to go. So people make these offers and you just stay on the asking price. They don't love it, but transfer, legal, you start to get any further, you can throw in the mansion, which, by the way, when you're starting to get into over $2 million, it starts to make a difference now. It's escalating just like the transfer tax is escalating, which it didn't used to do. So that's cash at closing that you just cannot wrap. And it's just easier because they can just keep that purchase price where it is and give them credits at closing. But when you're identifying what it's going towards and what they're paying, you have a little bit more leeway too.
When the last development I had was 2 years ago, and it was the same thing. The developer, as you said, purchase price, do not come to me. I will not accept it. Nope. Keep that purchase price where it is. They had financial people behind them. And
the mezzanine lender, they don't let you do it.
Correct. But on the concession side, they were able to do what they needed to do to make it a little easier on the buyer's mind. If you haven't already determined after this conversation, it's such a fluid market. It moves very quickly, as I said in the opening of the show. You've got to have your ducks in line. We're going to talk a little bit about it in my close for the week, coming up right after this, so don't go anywhere.
Hi, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you know the right partner makes all the difference. At Roadway, we deliver an experience your clients will love. For specialized services and white glove care, choose Roadway. Want to learn more? Email me at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
Okay, everybody, we are back with my thoughts for the week. So in a competitive New York City real estate market, strategy is key to winning because price alone doesn't seal the deal. Preparation, timing, and positioning do. A strategic buyer understands the market, knows when to move fast, and crafts an offer that aligns with the seller's goals while minimizing risk. That means going beyond just matching the asking price. It's about presenting a clean offer, being flexible on terms, anticipating bidding wars, and knowing when to be aggressive or patient. With the right strategy, buyers can stand out in a crowded field and close with confidence, even in a fast-paced or high-stakes environment. And that's our broadcast for today. Thanks to my guests for being here on set with me. I really enjoyed this episode. You can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Substack, or TikTok, if that's not enough, at Vince Rocco. Always remember how wonderful life is while you are in this world. And I thank Elton John and Bernie Taupin for those lyrics. And on a sad note, though, last week, Beach Boys' Brian Wilson passed. He was 82. I say thank you, Brian, for changing music forever. And from all of us here at Talking New York Real Estate and the More Network, to all of you all around the world, thanks for spending a part of your day with us. I am so grateful, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.